Course 3, Lesson 119. This is all about complex fractions and some different methods to go about simplifying them into one full fraction. So complex fractions in general, this is a fraction containing one or more fractions in the numerator or denominator. For example, 1/5 divided by 2/3, it has fractions in both the numerator and denominator. It's a complex fraction. Or maybe a mixed fraction like 16 2/3 divided by 100, or 15 divided by 6 2/3. We're just looking for extra fractions in that numerator or denominator. So we're going to look at a couple different methods of solving these. So let's simplify 1/5 divided by 2/3. Now, one common method that you'll probably see for something like this is saying I'm dividing fractions here. So I should use my method of copying, multiplying, and basically multiplying by the reciprocal. So I'm copying 1/5 and I'm multiplying by the reciprocal 2/3. And so I would get 3/10 here, and that would be my answer. Now that will work, definitely. But let's try a new method here that might work as well. And what it's based on is the denominators of each of these fractions, 5 and 3. And if I were to get these two common denominators, like if I were adding or subtracting them, I would say common denominator is 15. Well, actually, in this method, what we're going to do is multiply this fraction by 15/15, that common denominator. Now, if I multiply 15 by 1/5, I would get 15/5, or 3. If I multiply 15 by 2/3, I would get my 10 here. Okay, I would get 30/3, which is 10. And we get the exact same answer as we did up here. So you could do the copy-dot-flip method, or you could multiply by your common denominator on the numerator and denominator. Okay, all right, let's try something like in this top left-hand corner. Definitely a complex fraction here. Now, there is one method that we could use, just like we did before. We could find a common denominator between all of them and multiply by that, which we will try in a second. Or we could simplify each numerator and denominator together first, which I would recommend. I would say, well, I should add together this 1/2 and 1/3. Well, their common denominator is 6, so I'm going to multiply the first one by 3/3 and the second one by 2/2. And I would get 3/6 plus 2/6, meaning that my numerator is 5/6. And let's look at that denominator. I have a 3 and a 4, meaning the lowest common denominator is 12. So I'll multiply this first fraction by 4/4 and the second by 3/3. So I get 4/12 plus 3/12, so my denominator is 7/12. And now I can use either of the two methods that we saw above in order to simplify this. I'm going to use that new method of multiplying by the common denominator of, well, in this case 12, because I have 6 versus 12. So I multiply by 12 on numerator and denominator, and I would end up getting in my numerator 10. Okay, think about this as 12/1 times 5/6. I would get 10/7, and that would be my answer, 10/7. Now, like I said before, we have another method to go about this. I'll show it here at the bottom of the page. So if I have this 1/2 plus 1/3 over 1/3 plus 1/4, I could multiply by the common denominator of all of these, meaning 2, 3, 3, and 4. In this case, the lowest common denominator is 12. So I multiply by 12 on both the numerator and denominator. But what I have to remember is that this 12 goes to the 1/2 and to the 1/3. So in this case, 12 times 1/2 is 6, plus 12 times 1/3 is 4, over 12 times 1/3 is still 4, and 12 times 1/4 is 3, giving me 10/7, exactly like we got above. Okay, so you can use either of these methods to go about it. You can see that one of them is definitely less steps, but you have to think about it a little bit more beforehand. So let's go over to the second one on the page, 2/5 divided by 2/3. I'm going to multiply by the common denominator of 15/15, which means 2/5 times 15. Well, 2 times 15 is 30. divided by 5 is 6, or there's lots of other ways to get there. 2/3 times 15. Well, we get 2 times 15, which is 30, divided by 3 is 10. We reduce to 3/5. All right, so using that common denominator method, we can find that simplified fraction from this complex fraction. All right, and I'm going to show this newer method as well for this next one with that subtraction. And looking at these denominators 2, 3, 2, and 4, I would say that my common denominator is 12. So 12 over 12. Think about how I would get that. There's lots of different ways, but that's a whole other lesson that we've been through before, finding those least common multiples. But I'm going to do 12 times 1/2 is 6 minus, okay, remember that subtraction sign there. 12 times 1/3 is 4 over 12 times 1/2 is 6 plus 12 times 1/4 is 3. Gives me 2 over 9. Okay, kind of a fun method, very different. And I actually rather like doing that method rather than all of these common fractions up here. All right, 30 divided by 5/6. In this one, I would actually just do our copy.flip method of saying I have 30 over 1 times 6 over 5. Simplify these ones here and we get 36. All right, so going on, let's look at some of these a little bit more, still complex fractions, but working with mixed numbers in them. So it's not really all that much different. So change 28 and 4/7 to a fraction and simplify. So we have 28 and 4/7%. Let's use our method like we've learned in previous lessons to change this to a fraction. So 28 and 4/7, I need to get that into an improper fraction first. So I say 7 times 28 plus 4. Okay, you can work that out, take a second to work it out, but you would get 200 over 7%. Now remember how we go from a percent to a decimal, or really taking it out of that percent? I would need to divide by 100. Well, to show this, what we're actually doing is saying we have a complex fraction here of 200 over 7 divided by 100. You can use whatever method you would like to do this. Let's say we want to do my new method of saying, okay, if I have 200 over 7 divided by 100 over 1, the common denominator would be 7. So I'm going to multiply by 7 over 7 in each of these numerator and denominator. Well, 200 over 7 times 7 is 200. 7 times this 100 is 700, which means that it reduces to 2 7s. Lots and lots of ways to get there, but I'm just showing you kind of that newer method to go about this problem. Okay, just to slow down for a second, just in case this didn't kind of come through as I was doing this, the reason that this comes to 100 is I'm saying I have 200 over 7 times this 7 right here, which is a 7 over 1, and I can reduce these 7s to just get 200 over 1, which is just 200. So just know that's how I'm doing all of this multiplication, is thinking about it as 7 over 1, or like up here 12 over 1, whatever works for you to think about. Okay, we just have a couple more examples here to go through. Let's change 14 and 2/7 to a percent. So first of all, let's change it to an improper fraction. So 14 times 7, let me just work that out, 14 times 7. So we get 98 plus 2 is 100 over 7. And I'm going to be dividing by 100 in order to get this to a fraction, which means I'm going to multiply the numerator by 7, denominator by 7. And these 7s cancel out, so I just get 100 over 700 is 1/7. So 14 and 2/7% is just 1/7. All right, how about this next one? 8 and 1/3% to a fraction and simplify. So let's change it to an improper fraction. 8 times 3 plus 1 is 25 over 3. And then we're going to divide by 100. Now, just to go back to another method that we've done, I could just say 25 over 3 times the reciprocal of 100, which is 1 over 100. We get 25 over 300, which we reduced by 25, so we get 1 and 12. So 1/12 is the same as 8 1/3%. And lastly, I believe, lastly, we have 4 1/6. So turn this into an improper fraction. We get 25 over 6, and we're going to divide that by 100 over 1 to get it into a fraction. So between 6 and 1, 6 is the common denominator. So these cancel out up here, and we get 25 over 600. Reduce this by 25 in each, and we get 1/24 as my fraction. All right, well, I hope this video helps you understand these complex fractions a little bit better and being able to simplify them. Hope this video helps with your homework and for studying.